views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk. On this day, today, February 1st, 2016, one of the Bronx's most beloved high school teachers is beginning his retirement after 47 years as a leader of young people in the building that housed the former James Monroe High School and now is home to 4 other schools. Tom Porton is our guest tonight, and we will talk about his life as a Bronx high school teacher, note many of his achievements, and we will also roll up our sleeves with frank talk about our city's high schools. If you'd like to say something about the schools or Mr. Porton and his career, you can call us at 718-960-7261 or send an email at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or post notes on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of the program. For the here and now, congratulations on your retirement and for what you have brought to young people in the Bronx for the last 47 years. Welcome to my longtime friend, Mr. Tom Porton.
It's great to be here, Gary.
Tom, it's nice to see you. I guess it's sad on one level for the children of the Bronx that you will no longer be a teacher. Before we even get into your career, what'd you do today? I mean, today was the first day that you haven't had that idea that, gee, I've got to be teaching.
Well, my daily routine has been, for 47 years, to wake up at 3 o'clock, be at school by 5, be in the building with the custodian early in the morning. And I actually did that this morning, only instead of preparing for class, I went to my office and did final clearing out of the desk. So.
I have to bring this up, frankly, and I'm going to explain how and why Tom and I know each other for so many years. But I'm aware that years ago you had a heart attack, and as part of his convalescence, the doctor said, well, you should stay home. And I think at one point I had called Tom and said, well, you know, how's the home life going? And Tom was like, I can't stay home. And you actually went to work.
I did.
Because you felt, if I remember, you told me you felt better in the school building doing your work than being at home.
Well, it's certainly been a home away from home. And as I said, I'm there from very early in the morning to late in the day. So I've been there more than I've been home over 47 years.
Boy, it's really going to be interesting to find out what you find the time to do. And I will tell you that my father was a colleague of yours and an administrator in that building many, many years ago. My father died in 1982. And he always told me that, and he's a generation above, of course, and he said when I would have lunch, I would always want to sit and have lunch with Tom Porton and his colleagues, then some of the administrators, because he felt that you people got the idea. Just talk to me as you look back, and I know there will be a lot of time to look back. What are the things that just stand out that you remember the best about being a teacher at James Monroe High School and then some of the other schools?
Well, when I first started at Monroe, it was far more ethnically diverse than it is nowadays. In the early 70s, because I started actually at Monroe in 1970, we had such a mix of students, an ethnic mix of students, that it was really a wonderful place to be, to get to know all kinds of people. Now, of course, through the years that changed so that the ethnicities became less and less and less and less diverse. That's one thing. I remember doing the wonderful shows that we used to do. And Monroe had the largest school stage in New York City, second only to Radio City, and we used to do major shows, of which That's how I first met you, Gary,
guess
when
so.
you performed in one of our shows.
In fact, it's true. They needed somebody old and in the way, and so they brought me in. But though I remember those were lavish productions
Yes.
involving students at every level of the production,
That's
the
right.
backstage and creating the scenery, and of course the many performers. I want to show a piece which really puts this in perspective. Tom was inducted into the National Teachers Hall of Fame in 1994. BronxNet had a news show at that time. I was one of the reporters, and I did a story about you being the first and still only New York City teacher
Yes.
in the National Teachers Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Well, we have many wonderful Hall of Fame teachers, Hall of Fame level teachers who should be there. Nonetheless, this is the piece I did literally more than 20 years ago about Tom Porton and when he was inducted into the National Teachers Hall of Fame. And I think it will give you a clue as to the type of teacher we're talking about. Let's take a look. For James Monroe High School's Tom Porton, the craft of teaching goes far beyond standing in front of a class. Oh, as an English teacher, he's been in front of many classes since he came to Monroe in 1968. But it's the worlds that he's opened up for his students that have taken this short, bearded man from the Bronx all the way to Emporia, Kansas, as the first New York City teacher selected for the 4-year-old National Teachers Hall of Fame.
I would have been just one of those kids that sat in the corner and never did anything, just worried about my schoolwork. But Mr. Point is like, when I'm here with him, I'm outgoing. I go, I do things, and I'm always involved in school activities.
When I came to this school, I really didn't have a high self-esteem. Like, my father just died, and I was going through a lot of things at my home. And then I met him, and my life changed because he introduced me to so many different things.
Tom is so special. The theme of our school, if you will, is James Monroe High School, where dreams become reality, and Tom is one of the reasons why youngsters' dreams are realized.
There were some people at Monroe who told me, don't go there, you're going to be weighing over your head. And Tom Porton said, that's great, why not Harvard?
If you want to follow Tom Porton around during a school day at Monroe, you'd better bring your track shoes. For one, the phone never stops ringing in his crowded, noisy 5th floor office, which is usually bustling with activity. On this day, it's Baskets of Love, which are toiletries and candies sent to hundreds of AIDS patients throughout New York City hospitals. And along with the goods, which sadly are luxury items for many terminal AIDS patients, Tom's HIV/AIDS peer education students teach other Monrovians about AIDS and inspire them to write personalized letters of encouragement that are included in each basket of love. By the way, under Tom's guidance, this award-winning AIDS peer education group has brought AIDS prevention information to Bronx street corners and has commandeered all of the city's high schools in annual AIDS awareness conferences. So with Baskets of Love production in full swing, Tom is off to the next project. He hauls the TV roll-around to the first-floor auditorium, where he helps set up the special educational dramatic production that he's arranged for Monroe students on this day. And then, on his way back upstairs, Tom pauses to advise a colleague. And then, it's a few moments to work on the scenery for the school's upcoming production of a modern Cinderella play that Tom and his students have written. In a flash, Tom is off to check on how his AIDS peer education students are doing in the classroom. And then, it's back to the auditorium to get the day's performance underway. And then on the way back to the office, when the elevator operator has taken an early lunch break, of course, it's Tom Porton, who happens to have the right key and gets the show on the road.
Tom Porton has been the heart and soul of Monroe for the last 25 years. The interest he puts into his children is so unique that I have never found anybody else who has such a commitment to the kids and to everything that goes on about the school.
Just stepping into his shoes for 2 days, I was exhausted. So I don't know how he does it.
Tom Porton was an English major at New York University, where he also got his master's. Selected as Monroe High School's first coordinator of student affairs when the concept was established by the Board of Ed in 1971, Tom boasts of having created the city's first ever high school street fair, which cleaned up a drug-infested alleyway near the school. But aside from the years of teaching students to work for their communities, which has catapulted students like Sophia Quintero to important careers as public service executives, Tom has turned youngsters' lives around, sometimes by saving them.
I remember one young lady whose name I won't mention on camera, in 1975, who, during a rehearsal of one of my shows, climbed up on the catwalk backstage and threatened to jump off because she was so depressed. And for an hour, I was trying to talk her down. And today she's a lawyer.
When I was just depressed at any given time, he would be there in my sad times. He would be there in my happy times. You know, we would laugh together. Or when I'm sad, he would help me or console me or get into contact with my mother or whatever. But whatever he had to do, he'll do it to make me happy.
He makes students independent. He showcases their talents. He brings success to them. He's just the best.
He will go 100 miles, not 9 yards, to do anything he can so that a youngster reaches his or her potential. He is truly the quintessential person as well as educator. I love Tom Porton.
Congratulations to Tom Porton for being named into the National Teachers Hall of Fame. No one deserves it more than you.
We love you, Mr. Porton.
From James Monroe High School, Gary Axelbank for BXNY. Well, I guess we'd end the show. There it is. That's who Tom Porton is. I think it represented your work, I think, pretty well. 20 years ago.
I was just impressed that there was no gray in my beard.
Not at that time. And
No.
I actually, well, although I'm not pictured in there, but I had much more hair. What were you trying to do when you would go to school every day? What were you thinking about when it came to the young people? What was the challenge, and what did you say, this is what I've got to try and do each day?
Well, I remember when, before I started teaching, I went to see To Sir with Love with Sidney Poitier. And in that movie, he's a teacher in a London school. And he talks to the kids about teaching them about life. And that inspired me to want to teach about life when I started teaching. I always felt that what I did in the classroom was important, but what I did outside of the classroom was equally important. That educating the whole human being, the heart as well as the mind, was very important.
Theater was very important to you.
Yes.
I know personally,
Yes.
I know you enjoy the theater. You brought young people to the theater, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Numerous times.
Up to this day, yes.
And you created shows and plays and always used music as a way of
Yes.
helping
Yes.
a young person grow. I'm listening to things because I could ask him about it, and there's too many of them. He was a hometown hero in the Daily News. You ran a leadership class that students talked about. We pulled out, and I don't want to embarrass you too much, but I pulled out just some of the hundreds of Facebook messages that young people wrote about, and maybe they're not so young anymore since you've been teaching so long. So can we roll just some of these quotes? These are what people said about Tom Porton when they found out. So here's one. Shirley Lopez said, Tom Porton was instrumental in shaping my life and seeing that I was not a statistic. I was a teen mom and I graduated at the age of 17 and went on to college. I am now a successful realtor. We have others, right? Alberto Guzman, Mr. Tom Porton, thank you for giving me the chance to believe in myself. I was part of your drama class for 8 semesters, including being picked for the Executive Internships Program, a program that allowed me to do improv theater to public schools across New York City for 1 whole semester. It was an empowering experience, and I will never forget you. Tom, we could go on and on and on. There were literally hundreds of notes like that. Maybe the most obvious achievement or program was this AIDS peer education program. So why don't you, here's another one they're putting up. In life, it's in your blood. We still talk about you to this day, and most of us from that class and the next are still very close friends, and we all still have great Monroe memories with you included. That was from someone named Yearwood up there. But so let's talk about this AIDS peer education. Okay. What was it and why was it so special?
Well, in the early 90s, some kids came to me and said, we need to do something about this new disease that's impacting our family. And They even talked about family members who were infected. And at that point, I made a connection with an adolescent AIDS program over at Montefiore Medical Center. There was a woman named Elizabeth Ruffin who became my partner in this and actually came over and started teaching students to be peer educators. And the concept was young people teaching young people about safer behaviors with the goal of saving lives.
And the genius of it was that it wasn't you or me or somebody else telling the people, it was the young people.
That's right.
And
That's
what
right.
you saw briefly in that piece that we showed, it was young people on the street literally talking to their
That's
neighbors.
right.
And folks have to remember this was a different era. This was literally the middle of the 90s, right at the height of the AIDS
That's
epidemic,
correct.
and especially people in the South Bronx were having such issues.
Yes.
Ironically, this was, at least the way it was reported in the news and the way I understood it, this was kind of the fulcrum that made you finally say, you know what, I have to retire, because you never, I guess, would even consider retiring otherwise. So what happened?
Well, I had, up until this school year in September, I had an abbreviated program during the day which allowed me to do programs like this. And we got a new administration in September that basically cut out that extra time and gave me a lot more classes. But
This was one of the small schools that is in that building?
That's
that
right. I
James
was
Monroe High
working
School?
for Monroe Academy for Visual Arts and Design, which actually is the only one of those schools that still exists in the building from the original breath of James Monroe
Which we will
High School.
talk about in a moment.
Yes, but so I've been trying to do my projects as much as I could with this limited time. On World AIDS Day, which is a day that I always did something dealing with HIV, I was giving out a flyer called 101 Ways.
That's this flyer that I have right here.
101 Ways to Make Love Without Doing It. And it's basically alternatives to sex.
So I'm going to read a couple. Have a picnic, play a game of Frisbee, go swimming, give each other neck rubs, etc., etc. Relatively harmless stuff that you were giving out. I want to move ahead because we have other things to talk about. And so the idea was this wasn't accepted by the principal of the school.
The principal said this is inappropriate, take them back. And at that point, I realized that there was an atmosphere in the building that was not receptive to the kind of teaching that I had been doing for 47 years.
James Monroe High School was literally the first, or one of the first two high schools that was broken up into four small schools. You have just told us that 3 of the 4 from originally when it was broken up no longer exist. Why, I'm going to make a presumption here that you believe this, why has that not been a successful venture for your school and maybe other schools?
Well, the small school movement, which was supposed to give more personalized attention to the students, really didn't work in the Monroe building. And it doesn't work in a lot of buildings.
Why is that?
Well, first of all, in many of the schools, and I know in our school, classes didn't get smaller. The theme of the school was bogus, was a lie, and a lot of these small schools have wonderful names where it sounds like it's a wonderful experience, and yet they don't provide that experience to their students. It's just a name only. Not only that, but the offerings are a lot less now than they were in the big schools. The level of teaching has changed because unlike the big school, you have a single or 2 administrators supervising a group of teachers rather than separate departments with a chairperson.
You showed me something that I thought was interesting. I'm going to reach over and grab it. So you said this was a short story that you were asked to teach.
Right.
And yet this with the 17 lessons based on the short story.
Right. This is something called Engage New York. This is the new English Common Core curriculum that's circulating within New York City and in the state. And it is, to me, toxic, because it's exactly opposite the reasons why I became an English teacher, which was to share love of literature with my students. Here's another example.
Okay, and this is the irony of it. The Joy Luck Club is a book. Now, you told me that they don't ask them to read the book.
No.
They ask them to read the chapters.
That's
so here you
correct.
have a full book, and this is what they're asked to read, and here you have a short story, and somehow you have to get 17 lessons out of this little bit of reading.
You actually can go through 12 years of high school without reading a full novel, a full play, or a full biography.
And this underscored for you that, you know what, I can't run my leadership class. They don't appreciate the AIDS peer education program that literally saved lives. Angel from the South Bronx is calling. Angel, how are you?
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, I'm just calling because I'm a former student of Mr. Porton.
How did I know students were going to get online and call? So your thoughts about Mr. Porton?
Yeah, Mr. Porton, I mean, he's best. I was in his leadership class. Because of him, I ended up being vice president for Bronx High Schools. And he's just the best person there is. And, you know, I feel sad that he's retiring, but at the same time, I'm happy, you know, he can continue doing, you know, following his dreams and helping people.
Angel, thank you so much. We don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to cut you off. Do you remember Angel?
I do.
And I guess it's nice to hear from him.
It's been a wonderful experience hearing from so many of my former students.
Mm-hmm. You're going to have a retirement party.
I am.
And all people like Angel and all the other students are invited. If you go on to I Support Tom Porton on Facebook, you can see all that. But we have some information. We can put it up and a contact information. So, Dahlia, whenever you get a chance, let's do that. What do the schools need right now? What would you like to see that would kind of move things in a direction that you would like, that maybe would bring you back, although probably not?
Right. Well, you know, we have Chancellor Farina paying lip service to something called the social emotional health of the children. And I built my career on the social emotional health of the children. But I don't see it happening in so many of the schools. With this stress on testing and the stress on statistics, the social emotional health, which is that educating the heart, like I talked about, has gone by the wayside. Not only that, but creativity has gone by the wayside. This type of curriculum sucks the life out of literature, and it does it in tandem with doing away with the arts. And I haven't had a music teacher in my school for 20 years. I've had
that is unbelievable, especially for somebody who built a career.
Right. That's right.
And people like Angel and others spent their time experiencing it. Go ahead, I cut you off.
Luckily, one of the other schools in the building had a music teacher for a short time, so I utilized her. But for the most part, I've had to use karaoke tapes doing my shows up until the show I did this past year. And of course, when I started in September, kids were saying, what are we going to do this year? What show are we going to do this year? And I had to break the news to them that we're not going to be doing a show because I'm not going to be there.
Wow. Maybe we can make it a teachable moment. After all, you're a teacher. What would you say to a high school student now who watches this and said, well, wait a minute, here's a guy who taught in Bronx high schools for 47 years, and he's saying that things are kind of going in the wrong direction. Yet, this is my education, this is my life. What's the message to young people in light of the things that you're concerned about?
Well, you know, I always told students to educate yourself and speak your mind about what you've learned. And perhaps if there are young people hearing tonight about things that are wrong in the educational system, maybe they need to do some research, figure out things that would work better for their education. For example,
we don't have a ton of time.
Okay.
We have to do it real quick.
All right, real quick. For example, there used to be vocational training in the schools. That's all been cut out. and there are lots of jobs going unfulfilled.
So the message would be research these things
Yes.
and do it yourself
That's
on
right.
some level.
Do it
ask
yourself.
your parents.
That's
ask
right.
Gary.
That's
ask,
right.
ask Mr. Porton.
That's right.
Thank you for everything. That's all. For the friendship, for the many years together, and for many more years of just, I know that you're not going to stop.
Thank you,
so-
Gary. No.
Really one of the great Bronxites of all time, Tom Porton, and we appreciate his time tonight. If you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, or you put them on our Facebook page and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. We ask you to like Bronx Talk on Facebook. You can check out the archives at bronxnet.org. You find Bronx Talk on the lower right navigation bar. Now next week, February 8th, the developer who's building housing on a large swath of the South Bronx in a project that has rankled some, Keith Rubenstein of the Cherritt Group, is scheduled to be our guest. February 15th, we will host the debate for City Council in the special election for the 17th Council District, and on the 22nd, Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. will be our guest. A lot of good shows. Once again, thank you to Tom Porton for his great work. And thanks to our producers, Dalia Gonzalez, Jayla Duberis, also to the director, Shirley Arrieta. I see that Leilani is here and Clyde is here and the cast of Thousands. See you next week. Good night.
Don't wait. Communicate. Make your emergency plan today.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to